I can't do this anymore, Liv. I want you out of my life, Blake said suddenly, his voice firm. I stared at him wide-eyed. What the hell are you talking about? He sighed, looking away. We're done. I've got your stuff packed. It felt like a punch to the gut. This was the same man I had known for the last 6 years, and yet he seemed like a stranger. I paused, trying to process his words. So what, Blake? 6 years of marriage just like that? You're going to throw it all away? He met my gaze, his eyes cold. This isn't working, Olivia. I want you gone. Well, if he wanted a fight, I could give him one. But first, let me backtrack a bit. I'm Olivia, a 32-year-old freelance graphic designer. I would introduce myself. It wasn't always easy, but my hard work paid off, getting big clients and cushy gigs. Meanwhile, Blake was a mid-level manager at a tech company. We had our financial struggles at the start, but things leveled out thanks to my career. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy. Then Blake's parents, Harold and Martha, fell on hard times. Blake, ever the dutiful son, asked if they could move in with us. We were just making things work for ourselves. Are you sure about this? I asked him when he first brought it up. Yes, Liv. They're my parents. They need us, he said, sounding so sure. I reluctantly agreed. Anything for him, or so I thought. The day they moved in, the air was thick with tension. Harold, 62, and Martha, 59, showed their gratitude at first. But gratitude is a fleeting thing. Soon, Harold's expressions of thanks were overshadowed by his demanding demeanor. Martha's critiques about everything became a daily affair. Dinner is nice, but could we have expected a bit more seasoning? Martha said with that ever-present, shaky smile. Blake started siding with them more and more. It didn't take long before he was spending most of his time glued to their sides, neglecting me. I focused on my work, trying to drown out the growing tensions at home. But the pressure from Blake kept mounting. He wanted more money, more support, more everything. Can you pick up the tab for the electricity this month, and the water bill is due? He'd say, almost as if it was a given. Blake, I can't keep covering everything, I protested, but it was like talking to a wall. I felt like a stranger in my own house. The Blake I knew was slipping away, and a different person was taking his place. The tension clung to the air, thick and unyielding, suffocating any semblance of normalcy. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would have me fighting for my sanity and dignity. As I stood in our living room, Blake's cold words echoing in my head, I realized this was it. This was the moment everything started to unravel. Fine, I said, my voice steady. If this is how you want it, Blake, then so be it. His eyes flickered with surprise, but he quickly masked it. Yeah, that's how I want it. With that, I turned on my heel, heading towards our bedroom to pack my things. I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning of a battle for my life, my freedom. A battle I was determined to win. When Blake's parents moved in, the change was immediate. The house felt tighter, the air tenser. Our first dinner together set the tone for what was to come. I had prepared a simple meal, but the quiet was deafening until Harold broke it. This is it, Harold muttered under his breath, poking at his food with noticeable disdain. I forced a smile. Is everything okay, Harold? Do you need anything else? He barely looked up. It's fine, Olivia. Just different from what we're used to. Blake, sitting next to his father, spoke up. Liv's just trying to make everyone happy. Give her a break. Martha looked at Blake, her expression unreadable, and then turned to me. Maybe next time you could let me help in the kitchen. I know how to make things a bit more flavorful. That was the beginning of it. The polite facade slipped quickly. Harold and Martha weren't just houseguests. They were critics, constantly finding fault in everything I did. Blake, who once had my back, stopped defending me as often. I found Blake in the living room one evening, talking to his mother. She really needs to step up, Martha was saying. This isn't just her house. It's everyone's now. Blake nodded, looking exhausted. I'm trying, Mom. But you know Liv. Hearing this from the hallway, I clenched my fists. These subtle jabs felt like needles piercing my skin, constant and relentless. That night, as we lay in bed, I brought it up. Blake, your parents are becoming a problem. This isn't what I signed up for. He sighed and turned over to face me. They're just having a hard time, Liv. Cut them some slack. And can you help out more with the bills? We're all in this together. Help out more? I could barely keep the frustration from my voice. I'm already covering more than half. How much more do you expect me to do? I thought back to why I agreed to this in the first place. I loved Blake. I wanted to help his family, but it was becoming an unsustainable burden. Days turned into weeks. Harold and Martha weren't shy about being demanding. They didn't just criticize anymore, they expected complete servitude. Olivia, can you take care of this? Olivia, can you do that? Martha's requests were endless, and her criticisms were biting. One on particularly frustrating day, she asked, "What exactly is it that you do for work, dear? It seems like you're always on that computer, but is it really work?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Martha. Graphic design is my job. It pays the bills." "Well, it's not real work," she said dismissively. "Try managing a family, then you'll know what real work is." There was no winning with her. And Blake growing distant wasn't helping either. He came home later, avoided conversations, spent more time with his parents. One evening, I caught him glancing at his phone, the screen lighting up briefly. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. "No one important," he replied, but his tone was off. It was becoming clear that something more was happening. In those moments, a fire started burning within me. I knew I couldn't keep this up. Something had to change, and if Blake wasn't going to step up for our marriage, I would have to take matters into my own hands. Dinner after dinner, day after day, their presence became more unbearable. My patience was thin. Every criticism, every demand was pushing me closer to the edge. If Blake and his parents thought they could walk all over me, they were in for a rude awakening. This was our home, but they had turned it into a battleground, and I was gearing up to fight back, one way or another. One evening, I overheard voices coming from the living room. I stopped in the hallway, straining to hear. Harold's voice was unmistakable. "She's a gold mine, Blake. You should make sure we're all set for a while," Harold said, sounding smug. "I know, Dad," Blake replied, his tone low. "Good, just keep her earning. We'll be comfortable for years," Harold continued. I felt rage rising. They were talking about living off my hard work. I needed evidence, something concrete. I quietly pulled out my phone and recorded their conversation from the hallway, capturing their vile plans. The next morning, Martha found me working in the kitchen. "Still on that computer, dear," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, Martha. This is my job," I replied, trying to stay calm. She rolled her eyes. "It's not real work. Try managing a household, then you'd understand what hard work really is." I wasn't going to let her get to me, not today. "Well, someone's got to pay the bills around here," I said, adding a cutting edge to my voice. Blake's behavior was also getting strange. He wasn't just neglecting me, he was spending money lavishly, buying things we didn't need, new gadgets, expensive clothes, things that didn't add up given our financial situation. One night, I saw Blake getting ready to leave. "Where are you going?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Just a work thing." "Don't wait up," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Work thing?" I narrowed my eyes, but he brushed me off, already halfway out the door. Suspicion gnawed at me. I decided to follow him. Keeping a safe distance, I trailed his car down to a fancy restaurant. My heart dropped when I saw Blake stepping out, holding the hand of a much younger woman. I parked a bit away and watched, my stomach twisting as they walked inside and took a cozy, intimate booth. Pulling out my phone, I discreetly took photos, each flashless snapshot capturing a piece of my crumbling world. Later, they exited, and then it happened. He kissed her right there in the parking lot. I felt like screaming but held it in, capturing the damning evidence instead. It became crystal clear. Blake was cheating on me. I went home, replaying the day's events in my mind. Blake's family's leeching, Martha's incessant criticism, and now this, Blake's betrayal. I knew then that things had to change. I would not be their doormat anymore. The next morning, Martha started her usual tirade. "Olivia, can you clean up the guest room today?" "No, Martha. I'm busy," I said bluntly, not looking up from my laptop. "Well, excuse me, Mrs. Big Shot, too busy for household chores," she said, seething. I looked up, cool and composed. "I'm running a business, Martha. Maybe if Blake contributed more, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Blake entered the room, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I said, packing my things for a work meeting. "Just a reminder of who's actually keeping this house running." His eyes flickered with annoyance, but he said nothing. My resolve hardened. I would gather everything I needed and form a plan. Blake, Harold, Martha. They all underestimated me. But I wouldn't be underestimated for long. This was just the beginning, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow. I decided enough was enough. It was time to form an escape plan, and Blake would never see it coming. The first step was hiring a private investigator. I met with Mr. Davis, a seasoned investigator who had seen it all. Sitting across from him in his modest office, I laid out my situation. "I need proof, Mr. Davis. Proof of my husband's affair and anything else he might be hiding," I said, my voice firm. He nodded, jotting down notes. "Leave it to me. We'll start digging." With the PI on the case, I began tightening the reins on my finances. I stopped contributing to the household bills, letting Blake feel the strain. He noticed quickly. "What happened to all the money? Are you hiding it from us?" He demanded one evening, his face twisted with frustration. I looked at him with a steely gaze. "Maybe you should ask your girlfriend about financial transparency," I replied, my voice cold as ice. Blake's eyes widened, shock and fear flickering across his face. He tried to recover, but he knew I had caught him. "What are you talking about?" "I've seen you, Blake. At the restaurant with her," I said, each word hitting him like a hammer. "Don't pretend anymore." The color drained from his face. "Liv, it's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I said, my resolve hardening. From that moment, the atmosphere in the house became even more tense. Blake tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, I focused on gathering my own evidence and taking back control of my life. A few days later, Mr. Davis contacted me with a file of findings. He had photos, phone records, everything I needed. I was ready to confront Blake and his family. One evening, as Blake and his parents sat in the living room, I walked in, holding the envelope of evidence. "We need to talk," I announced. Harold glanced up, annoyed. "What now, Olivia?" Ignoring his tone, I focused on Blake. "This ends now. I have proof of your affair and your parents' plan to live off my earnings. You've all been caught." Martha tried to interject. "What nonsense are you talking about?" I threw the envelope on the coffee table. The pictures and documents spilled out in front of them. "See for yourselves," I said. Blake hesitated before picking up the photos. His face went pale as he looked through them. Harold and Martha leaned over, their expressions turning from curiosity to shock. This is ridiculous," stammered Harold, trying to regain control. "You have no right." "I have every right," I snapped. "You've abused my trust, taken advantage of my hard work, and tried to deceive me. No more." Blake looked desperate. "Liv, let's talk about this. We can fix it." "There's nothing to fix," I said, turning away from him. "I'm filing for separation. I'm done with all of you." Leaving them stunned and speechless, I went to pack my bags. The feeling of liberation was empowering as I packed up my essential belongings. Blake and his parents watched silently, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. As I walked out of the house, I felt a surge of relief. This was the beginning of my new life, a life where I would no longer be manipulated or betrayed. And no matter what came next, I was ready to face it on my own terms. Filing for separation was easier than expected. Blake didn't put up much of a fight. He knew the evidence I had against him was irrefutable. The papers were served, and I prepared to leave our shared home for good. On the day I planned to move out, I walked into a scene straight out of a bad drama. Blake, Harold, and Martha sat in the living room, their expressions dark and resolute. Blake stood up as soon as he saw me. "Sit down, Olivia. We need to talk," he commanded, a hint of desperation in his voice. "No, we don't," I replied, continuing to pack my things. Harold's voice boomed. "Enough of this nonsense. You're going to sign this." He shoved a document in my face. I glanced at it. It was a legal form transferring all my earnings and assets to Blake. I looked at Harold incredulously. "You've got to be kidding me." "Sign it, Olivia," Martha chimed in. "It's for the good of the family." "Family?" I shot back, fury rising. "You mean the family that's been using me? The family that has lied and cheated and manipulated me?" Blake looked at me, his facade crumbling. "We're struggling, Liv. We need your help," I laughed bitterly. "Your help? Help you and your parents continue to freeload off me while you carry on with your affair?" Blake paled. "That's over, Liv, I swear. Just sign the document and we can move forward." I glared at him, feeling the weight of every betrayal. "Move forward? With you? No chance." With a shaking hand, I reached into my bag and pulled out the damning photos. I threw them across the table, watching as their faces twisted in anger and shock. "What is this?" Martha demanded, picking up a photo of Blake and his mistress. "That, Martha, is evidence," I said coldly. "Evidence that Blake has been lying to me, cheating on me, and now you want me to sign away everything I've worked for?" Harold's face darkened. "You ungrateful," I cut him off. "Enough. I'm leaving, and I'm taking what's mine with me." As I turned to leave, Blake lunged for my arm. "Wait, Liv. Please, let's talk about this." I yanked my arm free. "There's nothing left to talk about." With my bags packed and dignity intact, I stepped out, leaving them behind. The sense of liberation was palpable. I drove to my new apartment, a small but modern place I had rented. It was starkly different from the house I shared with Blake, but it was mine, and that's all that mattered. A few days later, as I was settling in, Mr. Davis called me. "Olivia, there's something you need to hear." "What is it?" I asked, hoping it wasn't more bad news. "It's about Harold. I've dug up some information on his past financial dealings. It's bad, Olivia. Real bad." "Tell me everything," I said, bracing myself. As Mr. Davis outlined Harold's history of fraud and deception, a plan began to take shape in my mind. Blake and his parents had tried to ruin me, but now I had the upper hand. It was time to take things to the next level. Hanging up the phone, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. And I was ready to fight for it, no matter the cost. Moving into my new apartment was a breath of fresh air. Away from Blake and his toxic family, I finally felt like I could breathe. I poured myself into work, cutting off all financial ties with Blake. Without my support, it wasn't long before the pressure hit him and his parents hard. One morning, I received a frantic call from Blake. "Olivia, can we talk?" I laughed, the irony not lost on me. "What's there to talk about, Blake? We're done." "But the bills, the mortgage, we're drowning here." "Welcome to my world," I replied coldly before hanging up. That same afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Davis. "Olivia, I've found more on Harold. You might want to sit down for this." I leaned back, bracing myself. "Go ahead." Mr. Davis spoke calmly, but with a sense of urgency. "Harold has a history of defrauding others. I've compiled enough evidence that, if made public, could land him in serious trouble." A plan began forming in my mind. "Can you get me everything you have on him?" "Already on it," Mr. Davis assured. "You'll have it by tomorrow." The next day, a thick file arrived at my doorstep. Reading through it, I realized the gravity of Harold's actions. He wasn't just manipulative, he was a criminal. I knew what I had to do next. A week later, I made an anonymous call to a local journalist. "I have a tip on a significant financial crime," I started, my voice steady. "I have all the evidence you need." "What's the story?" the journalist asked, her interest piqued. "Harold Andrews, A History of Fraud. I'll send you the documents. You'll see for yourself." Within days, the news broke. Harold's past crimes were plastered all over local media. Blake's phone calls became more frequent, each one more desperate than the last. I ignored them all. Soon enough, I heard through a mutual friend that Blake was demoted at work due to the scandal. The glitzy facade of his life crumbled, leaving him exposed and humiliated. One evening, I received a call from Martha. Her voice was raw with anger and desperation. "How could you do this to us, Olivia?" "Do what?" I asked, feigning innocence. "You know damn well what," she screeched. "Yeah, you've ruined us. Harold's reputation, Blake's job, everything." I savored the moment. "You ruined yourselves by underestimating me and taking advantage of me. This is on you." She hung up, but the victory felt hollow. Facing betrayal from the people you once called family leaves scars. Later that night, Blake showed up unannounced at my apartment. He looked defeated, tired shadows under his eyes. "Liv, please, I'm begging you. Can we just talk?" I let him in, but my guard was up. "What do you want, Blake?" He slumped on the couch, looking around my new place as if seeing the stark difference between this and our old house. "I messed up, Liv. I know that. But can we start over?" I shook my head, almost pitying him. "There's no starting over, Blake. You made your choices. Live with them." "But what about us?" he pleaded. I stood firm, crossing my arms. "There is no us. There never will be again. Goodbye, Blake." Seeing he was getting nowhere, Blake left, head hanging low. The door clicked shut behind him, and with it, I felt the final severance from my past life. The road ahead was mine alone to walk. and I intended to walk it with my head held high. The fallout from the scandal was swift and brutal. Harold's face was plastered across every news outlet, his history of fraud laid bare for everyone to see. Blake's demotion followed soon after. The tech company wanted nothing to do with scandal-tainted employees. The pressure cooker that was Blake's home life finally exploded. I heard through mutual friends that Harold and Martha were tearing into Blake like never before. Their golden son, who was supposed to save them, had instead plunged them into ruin. One day Martha showed up at my door, her eyes blazing with fury. "Do you know what you've done?" she spat. I met her gaze, unflinching. "I did what I had to, Martha. You brought this on yourselves. How dare you?" she screamed, her voice shrill. "We trusted you, and you betrayed us." "Trusted me?" I shot back, incredulous. "You mean used me? Blake's affair, your freeloading, Harold's crimes, trust had nothing to do with it." She took a step closer, her jaw set in anger. "You can't win, Olivia. We'll bounce back. You don't get it, do you?" I said, shaking my head. "This isn't about winning. This is about getting free of your toxic grip. Go home, Martha. Face the consequences of your actions." She stormed off, but I knew this wasn't the end. Blake tried to win back my sympathy next, showing up at my apartment days later, looking more pathetic than ever. "Olivia, please. I need your help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why should I help you, Blake?" I asked, genuinely curious. "We're losing everything. The house, the savings. I don't know what to do," he said, tears welling up in his eyes. I leaned back, arms crossed. "What happened to all those high-paying tech jobs, Blake? Where's your girlfriend in all this?" "She left," he confessed, eyes downcast. "Not surprising," I said with a faint smirk. "But that's not my problem anymore. You made your bed, Blake." His face twisted in pain. "How can you be so cold, Liv? We were a family once." "No, Blake, we weren't a family. Families don't lie and cheat and use each other. Now get out. I'm done." He left, shoulders slumped in defeat. The realization that he'd lost everything finally sinking in. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. Work was flourishing. Clients appreciated my dedication and creativity. I reinvested my earnings wisely, buying a cozy lakeside house. It was a fresh start, a beautiful escape from my turbulent past. A few weeks later, I received an email from an old friend who'd seen the news. "Heard about what you did. Let's catch up soon," it read. It felt good, reconnecting with people who hadn't been part of the toxic mess my life had become. One day, at a coffee shop where I often went to clear my head, a young woman approached me. "Excuse me, are you Olivia?" she asked nervously. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "I'm a graphic design student," she explained, her voice trembling. "I've been following your work. It's really inspiring." "Thank you," I said, smiling warmly. "What's your name?" "Emily," she replied. We chatted for a while, and I could see a spark in her eyes, a passion for design that reminded me of myself years ago. Before she left, I gave her my business card. "Stay in touch, Emily. I'd love to help you find your way in the industry." As I watched her leave, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I had managed to break free from my past and was now in a position to guide others. The journey had been painful, but it led me to a place of strength and clarity. No longer shackled by betrayal, I was free to chart my own course, confident in my self-worth and the lessons learned. Life by the lakeside was peaceful. Every morning I would sit on the porch with my coffee, the serene water reflecting the calm I now felt within. My graphic design business was thriving, and I reinvested my earnings wisely. It was empowering to be financially free and stable. One evening, as I was winding down, my phone rang. It was Emily, the young graphic designer I had met weeks earlier. "Olivia, do you have a moment?" she asked nervously. "Of course, Emily. What's on your mind?" "I got an offer to work with a major design firm, but I'm not sure if I should take it. What if they want to take advantage of me, like your story?" Her concern was genuine, and I understood her fear. "Emily, listen to me. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. But also remember, not everyone is out to get you. Keep your eyes open and stay true to your values." "Thanks, Olivia. I just needed to hear that from someone who's been through it." "You've got this, Emily. Keep me posted, okay?" Hanging up, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Helping Emily reminded me of how far I'd come. I had turned my pain into a tool for supporting others. A few days later, while grocery shopping, I ran into an old acquaintance who had known both Blake and me. Sarah looked surprised to see me. Olivia, I heard about everything. How are you holding up? I'm doing well, Sarah. Better than ever, actually. Blake and his parents are in shambles. Their house is being repossessed, and they're facing legal troubles because of Harold. I heard, I said calmly. Poetic justice, I suppose. Poetic indeed, she agreed, giving me a knowing smile. Well, it's good to see you thriving. Olivia, you deserve it. As I left the store, I reflected on Sarah's words. Thriving was exactly what I was doing. Every step away from Blake was a step toward reclaiming my life. One evening, while I was enjoying the sunset by the lake, I received a call from my lawyer. Olivia, everything is finalized. You've successfully severed all financial and legal ties with Blake. Thank you, Linda. That's a huge relief. You're officially free, Olivia. Enjoy it. I intend to, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. With that chapter officially closed, I threw myself into my work and hobbies. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years, finding solace in the colors and brushstrokes. One weekend, a few old friends came over for a small get-together. As we laughed and reminisced, I felt a strong sense of belonging that had been missing for so long. By the end of the night, my closest friend, Jessica, pulled me aside. Olivia, I'm so proud of you. You've come so far. Thanks, Jess. It wasn't easy, but I had to do it for my sanity. You did, and look at you now. You're glowing. Her words meant everything. They validated my journey towards self-worth and healing. As the weeks passed, I continued mentoring Emily, helping her navigate the tricky world of freelance design. Each time we spoke, I saw a more confident, empowered version of her emerge. It was rewarding, knowing I was making a difference. One day, as I sat by the lake, watching the ripples dance across the water, I realized something profound. I had no regrets. Every painful step had led me to this place of peace and purpose. I picked up my sketchbook and began to draw, capturing the beauty of the moment, content with the knowledge that I had built a life worth living. Free from the chains of betrayal and manipulation, I had found my true self, and that was the greatest victory of all.
It really was the right decision to divorce you. You and your son are still as pathetic as ever. I make $200,000 a year, you know. It seems that my ex-husband just wanted to boast about himself. As proof, he didn't even try to ask about our current situation. Ah, right. I should introduce you to my current wife. This is Julia. He introduced his new spouse to me. What was he thinking? Ah, is that all? Are we done here? Bye then. Wait a minute. As I tried to leave, my ex-husband blocked my way again. Hey. Are you jealous because we look happy? Don't let your poverty twist your heart too. You'll only become more miserable. My ex-husband assumed I was unhappy. I was so angry that I felt sick. As I remained silent, he was about to say something more, but Steve interrupted him. Mom, why don't you fire this old man? What? My name is Kim. I am now 42 years old. I married Michael, a colleague from the same company, when I was 26. I continued to work after our marriage, but I quit my job when I got pregnant. Afterward, our son Steve was born. Once he turned 7 and started elementary school, child-rearing became a bit easier. Thinking it might be good to start working outside again, I discussed it with my husband. It seemed he had been waiting for this, as he agreed immediately. He probably thought it would help with our finances. But he began rushing me while I was job hunting. Did you find a job yet? No. Are you even looking properly? Any job will do, right? He seemed really eager for me to work. Moreover, while I was looking for a part-time job, he suggested, if you're going to work, isn't it better to work full-time? Even if not every day, how about 3 days a week for 8 hours each? Working too long would take me out of your dependent coverage, you know? Just because Steve is in elementary school doesn't mean he doesn't need any attention. I get home early, after all. However, Michael suggested that since I could put Steve in after-school care, working full-time 5 days a week would be better if being a dependent is a loss. He really seemed to want me to work long hours. I had said I wanted to work, so I couldn't argue much. But I was anxious since I hadn't worked for many years. Even if I decided to work full-time, I wanted to gradually get used to it. Quitting because it's too hard after starting wouldn't feel right. For now, I decided to start with a part-time job of about 20 hours a week, assuming I would work full-time eventually. Michael was complaining that I should start full-time right away. But when I said I would consider it if my health allowed, he reluctantly agreed. I never thought he was so concerned about our finances. Honestly, I found my husband's interference in job hunting annoying, yet I was also pleased. It's better to live long-term with someone who thinks about finances to some extent, rather than someone who is indifferent. However, I would later realize that this perception was wrong. One day, a few months after I started the part-time job, I received a message on my smartphone. Wondering who it could be, I checked and saw a name I hadn't seen in a long time. It was my former colleague and currently a colleague of my husband. It had been a while, so I casually read the message. But what it said shocked me so much that I exclaimed aloud. What? What does this mean? You must be joking. Long time no see. I saw your husband the other day, and he seemed really close to some woman. I thought it might be an affair, so I sent you this message. The message was informing me of my husband's affair, and it even included a photo. My heart was shaken. The photo clearly showed my husband, and he was arm in arm with a woman I didn't know. Of course, even if I knew her, being arm in arm would still be unacceptable. As I was shocked by the photo, another message came in. This woman is actually the daughter of the department head. She's also an employee of our company, so she definitely knows your husband is married. They're really bold, aren't they? I wonder if this is just how kids are these days. From my colleague's message, it was clear she was enjoying this gossip. But I replied with a thank you and closed the messaging app. I had never imagined my husband was having an affair. However, thinking back, there were many signs. Especially since he had been pushing me to work more at a time, when child-rearing was not yet stable. Today, my husband was supposed to be on an overnight business trip. Probably, it was a lie to meet his affair partner leisurely. The next day, when my husband returned, I immediately confronted him. Although I knew it was better to collect evidence calmly if we were going to divorce, I couldn't pretend to be fine. What is this about? When I showed him the photo, my husband was surprised at first. But then he quickly regained his composure and became defiant. Ah, I see. You knew. Well, it can't be helped. As you can see. Honestly, I was surprised because I expected him to make some excuse. The woman is the daughter of the department head. The department head is guaranteed a higher position in the future. I guess you understand from this? To put it bluntly, marrying this woman benefits me. She's younger and prettier than you. My husband looked at me as if I was stupid. I thought about apologizing and crying, considering our son Steve. So I had thought not to divorce him. However, how could I with his attitude like this? He showed no remorse for his affair. Instead, he blatantly compared me with his affair partner and said she was better. As I remained silent, my husband became even more emboldened. Well, that's the situation. I think I'll divorce you. It's a bit earlier than planned. But I was going to tell you eventually, so this is just the right time. And so, we got divorced. After being told so much, I couldn't say I didn't want to divorce him. It was better for my mental health to get a divorce quickly, get compensation, and end things. My husband paid the compensation at my asking price and transferred almost all his property to me. Naturally, I gained custody of Steve. For my husband, who was planning to marry the department head's daughter, giving away some money was probably nothing to him. In fact, when he was leaving the house, he left me with these last words. "Well, do your best living in poverty. Raising a child by yourself, you'll never be wealthy. Unlike you, I'm joining the celebrities." The department head's family is rich, after all. We'll probably never meet again, but struggle at the bottom. It's unbelievable that he could say such things, even though he has his own blood-related child. I felt relieved deep down to be divorcing such a man. Mentally I felt better, but everyday life was still tough. Even though I received compensation and property, I didn't have much savings, so I needed to work hard from now on. Living on just a part-time job was not possible. Eventually, I quit my part-time job and started working full-time. I felt sorry for Steve, but after elementary school, he had to go to after-school care by himself. Unintentionally, I ended up working full-time, and both my body and mind suddenly became very strained. The new job was unfamiliar, and I had to do all the housework by myself when I got home. Life changed completely from before, and the days passed by in a blur as I was too busy. Before I realized it, 7 years had passed since my divorce. But no matter how busy you are, humans adapt. Steve has become a middle schooler and can mostly take care of himself now. Because I've been busy, he has grown up to be quite a solid young man compared to other boys his age. He even cooks and does the laundry. Thanks to him, I've been freed from both housework and parenting. And for the past few years, I've had time for myself. Both my personal and professional lives are going very well. Now I can say it clearly, it was definitely good that I divorced such a man. If I had continued to be married to that awful man, I would never have achieved this life. However, one day while shopping at the local mall with my son, I ran into that awful person, my ex-husband, Michael. I hadn't noticed him, but he approached me. "Hey, isn't that you, Kim? Long time no see. You've aged quite a bit. Is that something you say when you meet someone after a long time?" No person with normal sensibilities would ever tell a woman she has aged. That comment alone showed me that my ex-husband hasn't grown at all as a person. I became irritated within seconds and responded tersely. "What? You look pretty old yourself. I barely recognized you." Honestly, my ex-husband really had aged quite a bit. I hadn't seen him in 7 years, but it seemed like he had aged twice that much. His hair was thinning, and he had a pot belly, a complete middle-aged look. Talking to my ex-husband felt like a waste of time, so I said, well, long time no see. But you don't really need anything from me, right? So, see you around, and tried to walk away. But it wasn't going to be that easy. My ex-husband blocked my path and started spouting nonsense. "Hey, don't be so cold. We're finally all together. Let's catch up a bit." I really didn't want to hear anything about my ex-husband's current situation. The only thing I would want to say is about the child support payments. He stopped making a few years after the divorce. Child support isn't my right, it's Steve's right. Yet, there he was, daring to talk in front of Steve. But my ex-husband didn't care about my mood at all. He started rambling about his own life, which I had no interest in hearing. I remarried after that. To the daughter of the department head in that photo. Oh, he's not just a department head now, but a managing director. And thanks to that, I've been promoted to department head myself. I'm definitely on the winning side now. Honestly, no matter how much my ex-husband has climbed the corporate ladder, it doesn't affect me, and I'm not envious. All I thought was, so what? I was even more annoyed that he climbed the ladder yet didn't pay child support. It's truly stingy of a winner not to pay a few hundreds of dollars per month. My ex-husband continued to boast, ruffling my feelings even more. It really was the right decision to divorce you. You and your son are still as pathetic as ever. I make $200,000 a year, you know. Ultimately, my ex-husband just wanted to boast about himself. That's proof enough since he didn't even try to ask about our lives. Normally, a parent would be interested in their son's life, but here he was. Not even speaking to Steve, who was right in front of him. Truly an awful father. Ah, right. I should introduce you to my current wife. Hey. My ex-husband called out to a woman looking at clothes nearby. The woman came over to us, and I immediately knew who she was. I had seen her in a photo once. Yes. She was my ex-husband's new wife. This is Julia, my current wife. How about that? She's way more beautiful than you were, right? He introduced his new wife to me. What was he thinking? This woman was the one who stole my husband while we were married. I'm glad we're divorced now, but it was a shock back then, and I harbored resentment. There's no way I could have a good impression of this woman. Even a dimwit like my ex-husband should understand that much. But he must really look down on us. It seems he can't even comprehend such basic things. Ah, is that so? Are we done here? I'm not free, you know. Bye then. I said my goodbyes with an extremely displeased feeling. Of course, I didn't even glance at the woman, much less greet her. Wait a minute. As I tried to leave, my ex-husband blocked my path again. Stop it. There's no point in hearing about your family. Hey. Are you jealous because we seem happy? Don't let your poverty twist your heart too. You'll only become more miserable. My ex-husband assumed I was unhappy. It's none of your business. I'm perfectly happy, so leave me alone. The biggest misfortune recently was you talking to me. Even though I said I was happy. My ex-husband didn't believe me and pitted my situation anyway. Well, happiness varies from person to person, but poverty isn't happy, right? Don't strain yourself. If a single, divorced mother with a child were happy, there would be no unhappy people. With that background, remarriage is impossible for you. I'm just worried as your ex-husband, you know? While saying this, the expression on my ex-husband's face was the exact opposite of concerned. He was completely mocking me. When I looked at his wife next to him, she had a smug, mocking smile as well. I could never be friends with this woman. She's the worst kind, getting pleasure from looking down on others. Right? I told you. You're much better than her. Be confident. My ex-husband was flattering his current wife, comparing her to me and praising her to the skies. Well, she did help him climb the career ladder. So he's probably buttering her up whenever he can. Truly the worst kind of man. You're really the lowest of the low. I can't believe you were married to her. His wife mocked me despite meeting me for the first time. That's the worst kind of behavior in a person. I wanted to leave because I felt like I might respond if I stayed any longer. But my ex-husband stood in my way, so I couldn't move. Just so you know, we're still in love. So there's zero chance of getting back together with you. Don't get any weird hopes. My ex-husband was under some ridiculous delusion. To think he believed I had lingering feelings after he caused our divorce with his cheating. And 7 years later, he still thought so. His head was too full of fantasies, and I was speechless. As I was speechless at my ex-husband's ridiculous fantasy, he seemed to think he was right. Hey. Shocked into silence? It's tough being a man in demand. With his thoroughly middle-aged appearance, what part of him was in demand? I was beyond angry, I felt sick. As I stayed silent, my ex-husband was about to say something more. But then, Steve spoke up. Mom, why don't we fire this old man? What? My ex-husband was so baffled by what Steve said. Steve seemed quite angry, calling his own father this old man. Well, that's perfectly fine by me. What do you mean, fire me? Do you understand what being fired means? I'm not someone your mom can just fire, you know? You're in middle school, right? You should study properly. My ex-husband even spoke condescendingly to Steve. It's one thing to mock me, but it's unforgivable to insult my beloved son. Just as my anger toward my ex-husband was about to explode, I heard someone calling me. Hey, what's going on here? A man approached as he called out, and my ex-husband's face froze. Why are you here? Mr. President. My ex-husband questioned the man in front of him. Why shouldn't I be here? I'm just shopping with my family. Are you saying I shouldn't be here? No, I apologize. I didn't mean it that way. I was just wondering why you, the president, were talking to my ex-wife. Ah, that makes sense. She's my wife now, after all. What? She's the president's wife. I can't believe it. Actually, I had remarried the president of the company, where my ex-husband works about 3 years after I was widowed. I became close to the president shortly after my divorce when he approached me while I was shopping at a supermarket. I had worked at the same company as my ex-husband, so I knew the president. My ex-husband had an affair with the department head's daughter, which led to our divorce, and then he married her. The president was well aware of this and, as a man, he seemed quite displeased by it. However, he felt he couldn't interfere with an employee's private affairs. That's when he spotted me at the supermarket and couldn't resist saying hello. I was surprised that the president remembered me, a mere former employee, by face and name, as I had been a receptionist at the company, which might have made it easier for him to remember. It seems your marriage didn't go well, but I'm sure you'll find someone much better soon. Mr. President, I'm glad you remember me. But you don't have to worry about me, I'm doing fine. At the time, I had been divorced for less than a year and was still putting on a brave face. However, the president, with his extensive life experience, saw right through my facade and offered kind words. They say divorce takes 3 times the effort of marriage. No matter how smoothly the divorce goes, it's exhausting. I haven't divorced, but when my wife passed away, I barely felt like doing anything. It's tough when a couple who once loved each other parts ways. So, there's no need to pretend you're not hurting. The president knew the loneliness that comes with the end of a marriage. Indeed, while I felt it was better to have split, I was also feeling a mix of loneliness and emptiness at the time. So his words really resonated with me. Talking about it might ease your mind. Feel free to contact me anytime. I'll always treat you to a meal. He said this and gave me his business card. I felt it was too forward to contact him for about 2 years, but as time passed, I found myself wanting to talk to someone again. Finally, I decided to reach out to the president. Despite his busy schedule, the president made time for me and treated me to a meal. When I was an employee, he was still a department head and seemed unapproachable. But having a meal with him revealed he was a genuinely nice man. Perhaps it was easier because I was no longer with the company. But soon the president and I became good drinking buddies. About a year later, he proposed to me with a serious look on his face. "You're joking, right, Chris? Don't say things like that even as a joke." I thought it was a joke since he mentioned it while we were drinking. But the president was serious. "At first, I just wanted to cheer you up after your divorce. But being with you really settles me. I haven't felt this way about anyone since my wife passed away. Honestly, you've been healing me. If you're willing, I'd like to spend the rest of my life with you. Please give me a day to think about it," I said and consulted my son. "I don't mind." "It's up to you, Mom. Decide based on whether you like him or not." Since there was no opposition, I decided to marry the president. To be honest, I liked him. I thought of him as a drinking buddy, but I also felt healed when I was with him. We healed each other, so there was no reason not to live together. And listening to him talk about his late wife, it was clear how much he had loved her. Every time I heard his stories, I felt fortunate to be marrying someone who could love me as he did. I even felt a bit jealous of his wife. Thus, we became husband and wife. The president treats my son as if he were his own. He had no children with his previous wife, but they get along so well that they seem like a real father and son. I am truly as happy now as I told my ex-husband I was. My ex-husband turned pale and trembled when he heard I had married the president. He probably never imagined that his ex-wife, whom he looked down upon as poor, would be married to the president. "Dad, this man was mocking Mom. Fire him," Steve ruthlessly told on my ex-husband to the president. "You fool." "No, Steve. What are you talking about? We were just catching up." My ex-husband tried to cover it up, but it was obvious to the president. You tend to look down on others, even at the company. I think what Steve is saying is true. I've heard various bad things about you from your subordinates. I think it's time for an internal investigation, so be prepared. My ex-husband never expected that Steve's words would be taken seriously by the president, leading to an investigation into his misconduct at the company. He apologized. "I'm sorry. I may have been a bit harsh to your wife. I apologize. Can you please hold off on the internal investigation?" Despite the crowded shopping mall, he apologized, clearly desperate to avoid the investigation. However, this act was practically an admission of his wrongdoing. The president was not swayed. "No, I'll proceed with it regardless. By the way, the executive director you are close to has also been receiving bad reviews. I'll thoroughly investigate both of you." Upon hearing this, my ex-husband's wife also apologized. "Please, not him. Just this man is fine, but leave my father out of this." Hearing her words, my ex-husband immediately began to argue with her. "What are you saying? Are you abandoning me? Don't mess with me. There are plenty of men like you. Of course, my father is more important." Their marital spat was indeed disgraceful, and we didn't want to be associated with such behavior. So we ignored the arguing couple and left the store. That selfish couple probably wouldn't last long after this. They had it coming. The president quickly organized a team the next day to thoroughly investigate the conduct of my ex-husband and the executive director. The findings were damning: harassment and verbal abuse toward subordinates, favoritism in personnel decisions, and demands for entertainments from business partners using their positions of power. These abuses had been ongoing for years. Using one's position to solicit personal gains was unacceptable, especially in today's age. As a result, both my ex-husband and the executive director were stripped of their positions and reassigned to regional branches. Probably, my ex-husband knew this would happen, which is why he had apologized in the shopping mall. He was aware of his misconduct. Knowing yet continuing such behavior made it even more reprehensible. His career was likely over. According to the president, both eventually resigned from the company, likely fearing retaliation from the employees they had harassed. They chose to leave. However, their troubles didn't end with their resignations. They were sued by the employees they had mistreated. Disliked by most, their numerous abusive acts were well documented, and they lost the lawsuit, facing substantial damages. The financial ruin drove my ex-husband's wife to blame him, worsening their marital relationship, which soon ended in divorce. The frequent fights and his abusive behavior might even lead to another lawsuit from his wife for damages. Watching my ex-husband's downfall reinforced my belief in living a straightforward and honest life. Meanwhile, I was blessed with a child with the president. At 42, it was a high-risk pregnancy, but our baby was born healthy, bringing immense joy. Steve was thrilled to be a big brother, lovingly taking part in caring for the baby every day. We even talk about Steve joining the company in the future. Despite the challenges of parenting at our age, seeing our baby's sleeping face makes all worries vanish. I'm grateful for this new life and ready to face tomorrow with resolve.
I stared at my phone in disbelief, the words on the screen blurring as my vision clouded with tears. It was a simple text message, but one that shattered the foundation of my life with 3 brutal words: I want a divorce. Trent's message continued, each sentence like a dagger to my heart. I've been having an affair with Lila, and I'm leaving you to be with her. It's over between us. My hands trembled as I clutched the phone, a maelstrom of emotions raging within me. Anger, betrayal, and devastation fought for dominance, leaving me breathless and nauseous. Trent's timing couldn't have been worse. He sent this bombshell while I was at the grocery store, surrounded by the mundane sights and sounds of everyday life. In that instant, my world crumbled around me, and I found myself lost in a surreal nightmare. As I stepped outside, the crisp evening air did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. My phone buzzed again, and I flinched, bracing myself for another blow. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Trent's message read, I want full custody of the kids, and I'm going to fight for the house. Fury ignited within me, burning away the initial shock and pain. How dare he think he could just discard me and our family like yesterday's trash? After everything we'd been through together, all the sacrifices I'd made for him and our children, this was how he repaid me? You lying, cheating bastard, I shouted, drawing bewildered stares from passers-by. I didn't care. The dam had burst, and years of bottled emotions came pouring out. My phone rang, and Trent's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice trembling with rage. How could you do this to us? Cass, please understand, Trent began, his tone maddeningly calm. I've fallen in love with Lila, and she makes me happy in a way you haven't for years. Happy, I spat. You selfish prick. What about the vows we made? What about our children? I'm sorry, but it's over, he said flatly. I'll be coming by to collect my things tomorrow. The line went dead, leaving me standing in the parking lot, shaking with fury and disbelief. Tears streamed down my face, but I refused to let them diminish the fire raging within me. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The meek, accommodating Cassidy, who had devoted herself to her family, was gone, replaced by a woman who would fight tooth and nail for what was rightfully hers. No longer would I be a doormat for Trent's ego and indiscretions. If he thought he could just walk away and start a new life, leaving me and the kids to fend for ourselves, he was sorely mistaken. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was war, and I would show no mercy. With renewed determination, I marched back to my car, my mind already plotting my next moves. Trent wanted a battle? He was going to get one. And by the time I was done with him, he'd regret the day he ever betrayed me. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache, a reminder of the emotional turmoil I'd endured the night before. But the ache in my heart was far worse than any physical pain. I forced myself out of bed, determined to confront the harsh realities of my new existence. First on the agenda, gathering evidence of Trent's betrayal. I rifled through his dresser drawers, my hands shaking as I uncovered damning proof, hotel receipts, charges for expensive jewelry, and worse, dozens of text messages exchanged with his little tramp Lila. "You're the only one for me, baby," one message read. "I can't wait to start our life together." Bile rose in my throat as I scanned through their sickening exchanges, each one more explicit than the last. How could the man I'd loved and trusted for over 15 years be capable of such depravity? The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my daze. I shoved the evidence back into the drawer and hurried downstairs, steeling myself for the confrontation. Trent stood in the foyer, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His gaze was cold, devoid of the warmth and affection I'd once cherished. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I told you, I'm here to collect my things," he said coolly. "Now, if you'll excuse me—" "Like hell I will," I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You think you can just waltz in and out of our lives like nothing happened?" Trent's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Cass. We're done, and it's time for both of us to move on." "Move on?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You've got some nerve, you cheating piece of—" "Watch your mouth," he snapped. "And don't act so high and mighty. You know things haven't been right between us for years." His words stung, but I refused to let him see how deeply they cut. "That's no excuse for what you've done," I hissed. "You betrayed me, betrayed our family, all for some young floozy." Trent's face flushed with anger. "Don't you dare talk about Lila that way. She's 10 times the woman you'll ever be." In that moment, something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, my hand lashed out, connecting with Trent's cheek in a resounding slap. He recoiled, clutching his face in shock. "You crazy bitch! Get out!" I screamed, shoving him toward the door. "Get out of my house and don't ever come back." Trent glared at me, his eyes burning with hatred. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs. Amid the pain and heartbreak, a new emotion took root, a burning desire for revenge. Trent thought he could discard me like yesterday's garbage? Well, he was gravely mistaken. I would make him pay for every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of anguish he'd put me through. As I regained my composure, a plan began to form. I couldn't win by playing fair, not against a man as ruthless and self-serving as Trent. No, I would have to fight fire with fire, and I knew just the person who could help me do it. Reaching for my phone, I dialed the number of my best friend, Jenna. If anyone could help me bring Trent to his knees, it was her. "Jenna," I said, my voice thick with determination, "I need your help. It's time to make that bastard pay." Jenna arrived at my doorstep within the hour, her expression a mix of concern and fury. "That lying snake," she seethed as she pulled me into a tight embrace. "I can't believe he did this to you." I fought back tears, determined not to let Trent's betrayal break me. "Believe it," I said bitterly. "The proof is right upstairs." Together we rifled through the damning evidence I'd uncovered, the hotel receipts, the jewelry charges, the sordid text exchanges. With each new revelation, Jenna's outrage grew. "We have to make him pay," she declared, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "He can't be allowed to get away with this." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "Trent thinks he can just walk away and start a new life with that little tramp, but he's got another thing coming." Jenna squeezed my hand, offering a supportive smile. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We'll take that bastard down together. Over the next few days, Jenna became my rock, my confidant, and my co-conspirator. We pored over every detail of Trent's deception, looking for any angle we could exploit. It didn't take long to uncover his underhanded financial maneuvers, secret accounts, offshore holdings, all designed to leave me penniless while he rode off into the sunset with his new plaything. That deceitful son of a bitch, Jenna snarled as we pieced together the paper trail. He's been planning this for months, maybe years. Well, his little scheme ends now, I said, my voice steely with determination. I won't let him take everything I've worked for. With Jenna's help, I began gathering ammunition, records, bank statements, anything that could be used as evidence against Trent. We would hit him where it hurt, his bank account and his precious reputation. As the days passed, I could feel a remarkable shift taking place within me. The meek, downtrodden woman I'd been was fading away, replaced by a fierce, unstoppable force driven by a thirst for justice. Gone were the self-doubts and insecurities that had plagued me for so long. In their place was a newfound confidence, a belief in my own strength and resilience. I started taking better care of myself, hitting the gym and revamping my wardrobe. With each passing day, I felt more powerful, more in control of my destiny. Jenna noticed the change, too. "Look at you," she remarked one afternoon, a proud grin spreading across her face. "You're like a phoenix rising from the ashes." I flashed her a sly smile. "You ain't seen nothing yet. By the time I'm done with Trent, he'll be the one reduced to ashes." Trent had made the mistake of underestimating me, of thinking I would simply roll over and accept his betrayal. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. As I pored over the mounting evidence, plotting my next move, a delicious sense of anticipation washed over me. The game was afoot, and I was playing for keeps. Trent wanted a war. He was going to get one, and by the time the smoke cleared, he would rue the day he ever crossed Cassidy Monroe. A week had passed since Trent's abrupt departure, and I was ready to strike. Jenna and I had gathered enough evidence to bury him 10 times over, but I wanted the satisfaction of seeing the fear in his eyes when he realized his carefully laid plans were unraveling. I arranged for us to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the city where we used to love grabbing Sunday brunch. The sight of it twisted my gut, but I refused to let Trent take that from me, too. He arrived exactly at noon, his expression a mixture of confusion and thinly veiled arrogance. "Cass," he said coolly as he slid into the booth across from me. "This is a surprise." I met his gaze, my own eyes steely with resolve. "Cut the crap, Trent. You know exactly why I asked you here." His bravado faltered for just a moment before the smug mask slipped back into place. "If this is about the divorce, I thought I made myself clear. This is about a lot more than that," I interrupted, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. "Why don't you take a look inside?" Trent eyed the envelope warily, but his curiosity got the better of him. With a dismissive shrug, he tore it open and began rifling through the contents, bank statements, investment records, all documenting the illicit financial web he'd spun. His face paled as the realization set in. "Where did you get these?" he hissed, his eyes darting around the cafe. "That's not important," I said coolly. "What matters is that I know everything, the secret accounts, the offshore holdings, all of it." Trent's hands trembled with barely contained rage. "You conniving little—" "I'd watch my tone if I were you," I warned, reveling in his discomfort, "unless you want all of this finding its way into the hands of the IRS and your precious Lila." His eyes widened at the mention of her name. "You wouldn't dare." A slow, vindictive smile spread across my face. "Try me." For several tense moments we stared each other down, the air thick with animosity and unspoken threats. Finally, Trent broke the silence. "What do you want?" he growled, his arrogance crumbling beneath the weight of his exposure. "What do I want?" I echoed, leaning back in my seat. "I want you to suffer. I want you to experience the same fear, the same humiliation, the same utter despair that you've put me through." His eyes narrowed. "You're delusional if you think—" "I'm not finished," I snapped, cutting him off. "I want full custody of the kids, and I want the house. Every last dime you've stashed away is going into a trust for them, one you'll never be able to touch." Trent's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me." "I can and I will," I said, rising from my seat. "Consider this your one and only warning, Trent. Play ball, or I'll make sure you lose everything. Your money, your career, your precious Lila. The choice is yours." With that, I turned on my heel and strode out of the cafe, leaving Trent to stew in the ruins of his shattered plans. A delicious sense of satisfaction washed over me. The game was on, and for once I was in control. As I stepped into the sunlight, Jenna fell into stride beside me, a proud grin on her face. "You were amazing in there," she gushed. "Did you see the look on his face?" I allowed myself a small, victorious smile. "Just the first of many," I assured her. "Trent hasn't seen anything yet." The battle lines had been drawn, and I was just getting started. Trent thought he could outsmart me, could discard me and ride off into the sunset with his little plaything. Well, he was about to learn a very painful lesson. You never underestimate a woman scorned. In the days following my confrontation with Trent, a strange sense of calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control of my life. No longer a helpless victim, but a woman taking back her power. Trent had gone into hiding, no doubt licking his wounds and plotting his next move. But I wasn't worried. The ball was in my court now, and I had no intention of playing by his rules. It was during this period of quiet that an unexpected ally emerged. Lila herself. The cheery ring of my doorbell one afternoon heralded her arrival, and I must admit I was taken aback by her presence on my doorstep. "Lila," I said, fighting to keep my voice even. "What a surprise." She offered me a hesitant smile. Her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I know this is awkward, but I was hoping we could talk." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let her in. Whatever her game, I was curious to see it play out. We settled in the living room, an uneasy silence stretching between us. Finally, Lila spoke up. I saw Trent the other day," she began, her voice small. He was a mess." I arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "Do tell." Lila Worryline creased her brow. "He kept ranting about you, about some kind of evidence you had. Cass, what's going on?" For a moment, I debated how much to reveal, but something in Lila's wide, guileless eyes told me she was just as much a victim of Trent's lies as I was. And so I told her everything, the affair, the financial deception, my plans for vengeance. As the sordid tale tumbled out, I watched Lila's expression shift from confusion, outrage. "That lying son of a bitch," she spat when I'd finished, her hands clenched into tight fists. "He told me. He said he was going to divorce you, that we could finally be together without any secrets." I couldn't help but bark out a bitter laugh. Looks like Trent was playing us both for fools. Tears glistened in Lila's eyes, but they were born of anger rather than sorrow. "What are you going to do?" A slow, vindictive smile spread across my face. "I'm going to burn his entire world to the ground, and I could use a partner in crime." Lila's eyes widened, but she didn't recoil from the implied offer. If anything, her gaze grew more determined. "I'm in," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "That bastard needs to pay for what he did to us." And just like that, an unlikely alliance was forged. Two women, once pitted against each other, now united in their quest to take down the man who had betrayed them both. Over the next few days, Lila and I pored over every shred of evidence, every damning document, crafting a meticulous plan to completely dismantle Trent's life. We would strike at his finances, his reputation, his very way of life. No stone would be left unturned. Revenge took on an entirely new meaning as Lila and I worked in tandem. What I lacked in knowledge of Trent's personal life, she more than made up for, and what she couldn't provide in terms of resources, I gladly supplied. With each passing day, our bond grew stronger, fortified by our shared trauma and an unshakable thirst for justice. We were an unstoppable force, and Trent would soon feel the full brunt of our wrath. As we put the finishing touches on our scheme, Lila turned to me, her eyes blazing with determination. "You ready to make that bastard pay?" she asked, her voice laced with anticipation. I flashed her a wolfish grin. "More than ready. Let's light this candle." Trent's downfall was all but assured. He thought he could play us, could shatter our lives without consequence. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The game was afoot, and we were playing for keeps. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Lila and I had meticulously plotted every move, gathered every shred of evidence, and laid the trap with exquisite precision. All that was left was to spring it, and watch as Trent's world came crashing down around him. It began with a series of anonymous tips to the IRS, detailing the intricate web of offshore accounts and shady financial dealings we'd uncovered. Within days, the auditors were swarming, and Trent's once immaculate records were being picked apart. Next, we leaked the incriminating text messages and hotel receipts to the local media, along with photos and videos that left no doubt as to the tawdry nature of Trent's affair. His sleazy exploits were plastered across every newspaper and news channel, his indiscretions laid bare for the world to see. I'll never forget the look on his face when he stormed through my front door that fateful morning, his eyes wild with panic and rage. "You crazy bitch," he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "What have you done?" I rose from the couch, unfazed by his outburst. "Me? I haven't done anything, Trent. I'm just an innocent party in all of this." His gaze shifted to Lila, who stood beside me, her arms folded across her chest in defiant solidarity. "You," he snarled, rounding on her. "You did this, didn't you? You vindictive little—" "Watch your mouth," I warned, stepping between them. "Your quarrel is with me, not her." Trent's face contorted in an ugly sneer. "This isn't over, Cass. Not by a long shot. You think you've won, but I'm going to bury you. I'll take the kids, the house, everything." I wouldn't be so sure about that. The new voice belonged to my lawyer, Mr. Davidson, who strode into the room with a grim expression. "Mr. Davidson?" Trent sputtered, his bravado faltering. "What's going on here?" The lawyer fixed him with a withering stare. "What's going on, Mr. Monroe, is that your underhanded financial dealings have been brought to light. The IRS is already preparing charges of tax evasion and fraud, and that's just the tip of the iceberg." Trent's face drained of color. But my money is being seized as we speak," Mr. Davidson continued, relentless, "along with your assets, your property, and quite possibly your freedom." "You can't do this," Trent cried, panic lending a shrill edge to his voice. "I'll fight this. I swear to God." Mr. Davidson shook his head, his lips curling into a thin, humorless smile. "I'd save my energy if I were you, Mr. Monroe. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and it's only a matter of time before the other shoes drop." As if on cue, Trent's phone began ringing incessantly, no doubt a barrage of calls from his frantic colleagues and erstwhile lovers. With shaking hands, he pulled it from his pocket, his eyes widening in horror as he scanned the incoming messages. No, this can't be happening. But it was. His sordid affairs, his financial crimes, every last skeleton he'd tried so desperately to keep buried, was being violently exhumed and laid bare for all to see. In that moment, I allowed myself a fleeting sense of triumph. We had well and truly dismantled Trent's life, bringing him to his knees just as he had done to me. As the reality of his downfall set in, Trent turned to me, his eyes burning with impotent fury. "You won't get away with this," he spat, his words laced with venom. "I'll make you pay if it's the last thing I do." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm counting on it." With a dismissive flick of my hand, I turned away, signaling the end of our interaction. Trent had been utterly destroyed, both personally and professionally, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The battle was won, and I had emerged victorious, lean, resolute, and unbowed by his attempts to break me. As Trent was led away, Mr. Davidson turned to me, a grudging respect in his eyes. "Well played, Mrs. Monroe," he murmured. "Well played indeed." Lila's hand found mine, giving it a gentle squeeze as we watched the shattered husk of a man disappear. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I was ready to face it head-on. Trent's betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the end it had gifted me with something far more precious, the strength to fight for myself and my future. As I looked toward the dawn of new beginnings, one thought echoed through my mind: let the karma begin. The weeks following Trent's downfall were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers, accountants, and investigators swarmed around me, dismantling the tangled web of deceit he'd so carefully constructed. With each passing day, new revelations of his misdeeds came to light, and the full extent of his betrayal became glaringly apparent. Through it all, I remained stoic and resolute, my thirst for vengeance tempered by a growing sense of relief. The nightmare was finally over, and I could begin to rebuild my life on my own terms. Lila proved to be an invaluable ally during this turbulent time. We grew closer than I ever could have imagined, bound by our shared trauma and the knowledge that we had taken down a true monster together. "You're one tough cookie, Cass," she remarked one evening as we shared a glass of celebratory wine. "I don't know how you managed to keep it together through all of this." I allowed myself a rueful smile. Believe me, there were times when I wanted to curl up and just disappear, but then I'd remember what that bastard put us through, and it would harden my resolve all over again. Lila nodded, her expression somber. "He'll get what's coming to him. The courts, the law, they'll make sure of that." "I hope so," I murmured, swirling the rich liquid in my glass. "But part of me wants more than just a court ruling or a prison sentence." Lila arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" A slow, predatory smile spread across my face. A little taste of his own medicine. The opportunity to exact my ultimate revenge came sooner than expected. One crisp autumn evening, a familiar figure appeared on my doorstep, a haggard, broken shell of the man who had once sworn to love and cherish me. "Cass," Trent rasped, his eyes sunken and haunted. "We need to talk." I eyed him warily, taking in his disheveled appearance and the stench of cheap whiskey that clung to him. "Talk," I echoed, unable to keep the disdain from my voice. "About what exactly?" "Your complete and utter disgrace." He flinched as if I'd struck him, but soldiered on. "Please, Cass, I'm begging you. Give me a chance to explain, to make things right." Despite my better judgment, I allowed him to enter, if only to witness the full extent of his pathetic groveling. Trent sank into the nearest chair, his hands trembling as he struggled to collect his thoughts. "I've lost everything," he croaked, his voice thick with emotion. "My job, my money, my reputation, all of it gone, because of my own stupidity and arrogance." I said nothing, watching him impassively as he slowly unraveled. "And Lila," a bitter laugh escaped his cracked lips, "she took off the moment the truth came out, took whatever she could grab and vanished, just like that." "Did you expect anything less?" I asked coolly. "She was using you, just like you used me." Trent's head fell into his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I've made so many mistakes, Cass. Hurt so many people, especially you. He lifted his head, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry for everything. If I could take it all back, I would in a heartbeat." For an endless moment, I simply stared at the broken husk of a man before me, weighing his words and pleas for absolution. Finally, I spoke. "Did you really think some half-baked apology would undo the years of pain and anguish you put me through?" I asked, my voice hard as steel. "The lies, the betrayal, the disrespect. Did you honestly believe a few crocodile tears would absolve you of all that?" Trent opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Save your breath," I spat. "You made your choices, Trent, and now you're living with the consequences. You thought you could just toss me aside like garbage for some younger piece of ass, leave me with nothing while you rode off into the sunset?" I rose from my seat, looming over his shriveled form with a cold, merciless glare. "Well, you were wrong, dead wrong, and now you'll spend every day haunted by that mistake, tormented by the knowledge that you threw away the best thing you ever had on a whim." Trent's head fell once more, his body shuddering with ragged sobs. I felt no pity, no sympathy, only the grim satisfaction of a debt finally paid in full. "Get out," I said, my voice laced with finality. "And don't ever show your face here again." As Trent dragged himself from the house, a broken and defeated man, I turned to find Lila watching from the nearby doorway, her eyes shining with pride. "Well done, Cass," she murmured. "Well done." In that moment, I knew my long journey had finally reached its end. The scales had been balanced, karma restored, and I had emerged victorious. It was, in every sense of the word, a new beginning. The weeks following Trent's pathetic attempt at reconciliation were a whirlwind of activity. With the legal matters finally resolved and my financial security assured, I found myself facing an unfamiliar sensation: freedom. For the first time in years, I was truly unshackled from the weight of Trent's betrayal and manipulation. The future stretched out before me, vast and full of possibility. Lila remained a constant presence during this period of transition, her unwavering support and friendship proving invaluable as I navigated the uncharted waters of my new life. "You've come so far, Cass," she remarked one sunny afternoon as we strolled through the park near my home. "Just look at you. You're practically glowing." I couldn't help but smile at her observation. It was true. The haunted, hollow-eyed woman I'd been in the depths of my turmoil seemed like a distant memory. "I owe it all to you, you know," I said, giving her hand an affectionate squeeze. "If it wasn't for your help, your courage, I might never have found the strength to take Trent down." Lila waved off the praise with a dismissive gesture. "Don't sell yourself short. The fire was always there. I just helped fan the flames a little." Her words rang true. The past year had been a crucible, a trial by fire that had forged me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. The insecurities and self-doubts that had once held me back were gone, replaced by an unshakable sense of confidence and self-worth. As we continued our stroll, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. From the depths of despair and betrayal to a life brimming with promise and possibility, it was almost too much to comprehend. "So, what's next for the indomitable Cassidy Monroe?" Lila asked, a teasing lilt to her voice. I considered her question for a moment, letting the warm spring breeze caress my face. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "For the first time in a long while, I don't have some grand plan or objective mapped out. I think I'd like to just live, you know? Enjoy this new lease on life, stop and smell the roses for a change." Lila's face split into a broad grin. "Sounds like a plan to me. Just promise you won't become a complete hermit, okay? I need my partner in crime around to keep me on my toes." I laughed, the sound rich and uninhibited. "Deal." As the weeks melted into months, I relished the simple joys that had once eluded me. Lazy Sunday mornings, impromptu girls' nights out with Leela and Jenna, quality time with my children. Each day was a gift, unburdened by the specter of Trent's lies and manipulation. Of course, there were moments when the past would creep up on me, uninvited flashes of pain and heartache that threatened to reopen old wounds. But I found solace in the knowledge that I had persevered, that I had taken my life back from the brink and emerged stronger than ever. Trent was little more than a ghost, a lingering shadow that grew fainter with each passing day. I refused to afford him any more power over me or my happiness. As for his ultimate fate, I cared little. Rumor had it he'd slunk off to parts unknown, his wealth and reputation in tatters. A part of me hoped he was suffering, dwelling in the pit of his own making, but the larger part simply didn't give a damn. He was a specter of the past, and I was too busy embracing my future to dwell on him any longer. With Lila by my side, I embarked on a new chapter, one filled with new adventures, new joys, and a newfound sense of liberation. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time in ages, I greeted the uncertainty with open arms and a radiant smile. Wherever life took me, I knew one thing for certain. The specters of the past held no power over me. I was the master of my destiny, the author of my own story. And this time, I was writing one hell of an ending. I stared at Delia's newborn cradled in her arms, an overwhelming sense of disbelief washing over me. My eyes darted between the tiny bundle and the man standing beside her. Greg, my husband of 7 years. "What's going on?" I choked out, unable to process the sight before me. Delia, my supposed best friend since college, looked up at me with an expression I didn't recognize. "Leela, I should have told you sooner," she began, her voice laced with guilt. "Greg and I, we're together. This is our child." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, stealing my breath away. My mind raced back to our carefree days at university, when Delia and I were inseparable. We'd shared every secret, every triumph and heartbreak. How could she betray me like this? Greg shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my gaze. "Lila, I'm sorry. It just happened." "It just happened," I echoed, fury rapidly replacing the initial shock. "You've been sleeping with my best friend behind my back, and that's all you have to say?" Delia flinched, clutching the baby closer. "We never meant to hurt you, Lila. Things just got complicated." Complicated didn't begin to cover it. My marriage, my friendships, my entire world, all crumbling before my eyes. I thought back to the past year, Greg's frequent business trips and late nights at the office. The signs were there, but I'd been too blind to see them. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. Greg sighed heavily. "About a year. A year. 12 months of lies and deception right under my nose. I felt sick to my stomach. Delia reached out to me, her eyes pleading. Lila, please try to understand. Understand? I cut her off, recoiling from her touch. How can I possibly understand this? You've betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. Greg stepped forward, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. It's not that simple, Lila. Delia and I, we love each other. His words felt like a slap in the face. Love? You don't know the meaning of the word. I spun on my heel, unable to bear the sight of them any longer. Don't worry, you won't have to explain yourselves. I'm done. As I stormed out of the hospital room, the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me. But beneath the pain and anger, a newfound resolve took root. They would pay for this. I would make sure of it. The drive home passed in a blur, a torrent of emotions raging within me. Delia's betrayal stung deeper than I could have imagined, her selfish actions shattering the bond we once shared. But it was Greg's deceit that cut me to the core. The man I'd vowed to spend my life with had obliterated that promise without a second thought. As I pulled into the driveway, I steeled myself, forcing a mask of calm over my features. Greg couldn't know the depths of my knowledge, not yet. I needed to play along, to gather the evidence that would bring their twisted game crashing down. The front door swung open, and there he stood, a bemused expression on his face. Everything okay? You look shaken up. I mustered a tight smile, willing my voice steady. Yeah, just a long day at the hospital visiting Delia. The lies slipped off my tongue with surprising ease. You know how exhausting she can be. Greg chuckled, seemingly oblivious to the maelstrom raging within me. That's our Delia, always one for drama. He pulled me into an embrace, and I fought the urge to recoil from his touch. Over the next few days, I watched him like a hawk, scrutinizing his every move for signs of his deception. The little things I'd once overlooked now glared at me. The lingering scent of an unfamiliar perfume, the furtive glances at his phone, the late nights working. How could I have been so blind? Determined to unravel the truth, I made a call to an old friend, a private investigator I'd known since college. Within hours, he had Greg's movements under surveillance, tracking his comings and goings with meticulous detail. The evidence trickled in slowly at first, receipts for expensive dinners, hotel charges on our joint credit card. But then the floodgates opened and a clearer picture emerged. Delia had been siphoning money from our accounts for months, funneling it into a hidden slush fund. Plane tickets, jewelry, even a down payment on a cozy little bungalow, all purchased with our hard-earned savings, all part of their twisted plan. With each new revelation, my fury burned hotter, an inferno of rage threatening to consume me. But I kept my cool, maintaining the facade of marital bliss while secretly plotting my revenge. Then, one fateful day, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. A copy of a prenatal agreement between Greg and Delia, outlining their intentions to raise the child together, at my expense. I clutched the damning document, my hands trembling. They'd played me for a fool, using my love and trust as weapons against me. But no more. It was time to strike back, to expose their web of lies and make them face the consequences of their actions. As I looked up, my gaze fell on Greg, laughing and chatting with friends like nothing was amiss. A cruel smile tugged at my lips. Oh, how the tables were about to turn. With the prenatal agreement in hand, I finally had the smoking gun I needed. Greg and Delia's deception was laid bare, their treacherous plot exposed in black and white. But the document was just the tip of the iceberg. My investigation had unearthed a trail of lies that ran deeper than I could have imagined. Greg's suspicious behavior only escalated in the following days, his absences growing longer and more frequent. I'd catch him poring over financial statements late into the night, his brow furrowed with worry. Little did he know, I was one step ahead, meticulously cataloging every cent he and Delia had siphoned from our accounts. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into offshore accounts and untraceable investments. It was clear they'd been planning this for years, methodically bleeding me dry while I remained obliviously in love. Through it all, I maintained my facade of normalcy, playing the doting wife while quietly gathering the arsenal that would bring them to their knees. But even as the evidence mounted, a part of me still struggled to comprehend the depths of their betrayal. How could Delia, my oldest friend, the woman who'd once sworn to be my maid of honor, do this to me? We'd shared everything, from our deepest secrets to our wildest dreams. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. And Greg? The man I'd vowed to love and cherish, the father I'd hoped to raise children with. His lies cut deepest of all, a vile violation of the sacred trust between husband and wife. I'd given him everything, and he'd repaid me with deceit and betrayal. As the days ticked by, my resentment festered, fueled by each new revelation. I pored over the evidence, committing every sordid detail to memory. The fake business trips, the clandestine rendezvous, the countless nights they'd lain together while I remained blissfully unaware. Through it all, I remained an island of calm on the surface, even as a storm of rage raged within me. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt and paranoia driving a wedge between us. But I played along, biding my time until the perfect moment to strike. That moment came in the form of a family gathering, a celebration of my sister-in-law's promotion at work. It was the ideal stage, a chance to expose their duplicity before the very people they'd hoped to deceive. As the invitations went out, I couldn't help but smile at the delicious irony. They thought they were attending a joyous occasion, blissfully unaware that it would be the scene of their downfall. Little did they know, the game was up, and I held all the cards. With each passing day, my anticipation grew, a heady mix of dread and exhilaration coursing through my veins. Soon they would face the consequences of their actions, their lies laid bare before the world. And I would be the one to deliver the final, crushing blow. As the days ticked down to the fateful family gathering, I found an unexpected ally in my quest for retribution. Greg's own sister, Jenna. It turned out she'd harbored suspicions about her brother's fidelity for years, her intuition picking up on the subtle signs I'd been too naive to see. "I always knew there was something off about him," she confided in me over coffee one afternoon. "The late nights, the shady business deals, it all reeked of a man with something to hide." I nodded grimly, sliding the damning prenatal agreement across the table. Jenna's eyes widened as she scanned the document, her expression morphing from shock to fury. "That bastard," she hissed, slamming her fist on the table. "How could he do this to you, Lila? To our family?" In that moment, I saw a kindred spirit in Jenna, a woman wronged by the same man, her trust betrayed by blood. Without hesitation, I laid out the full scope of Greg and Delia's deception, every sordid detail I'd uncovered through my investigation. Jenna listened in stunned silence, her anger growing with each revelation. By the time I finished, she was trembling with rage, her knuckles white from gripping the table's edge. "We have to make them pay," she growled, her eyes blazing with determination. "They can't be allowed to get away with this." I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "That's exactly what I intend to do." Over the next few days, Jenna and I became co-conspirators, meticulously plotting our revenge. We pored over the evidence, strategizing the perfect moment and method to expose Greg and Delia's duplicity. "The family gathering is our best shot," Jenna mused, tapping her pen against the stack of incriminating documents. "We can't let them wriggle out of this one." "Agreed," I replied, my voice steely with resolve. "They need to face the consequences of their actions in front of everyone they've betrayed." As the event drew nearer, our plan solidified. We would let Greg and Delia bask in the illusion of normalcy, lulling them into a false sense of security. Then, at the height of the celebration, we would drop our bombshell, unleashing the full weight of their deception before the entire family. "They'll have nowhere to run," Jenna murmured, a predatory glint in her eye. "No more lies, no more secrets, just the ugly truth laid bare for all to see." With each passing day, my anticipation grew, fueled by the knowledge that retribution was finally within reach. Greg and Delia had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and their arrogance would be their undoing. As the hours ticked down, I found myself dwelling on Delia's betrayal, the sting of her deceit cutting deeper than I could have imagined. We'd been more than friends. We'd been sisters, bound by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of youth. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. Her actions spoke of a darkness within, a bottomless well of greed and manipulation that knew no bounds. With each new revelation about her past misdeeds, my disgust grew, the friendships she'd sabotaged, the lives she'd callously upended in pursuit of her own desires. She was a viper in human skin, striking without remorse or regret. But soon her venomous ways would be laid bare. Her toxic influence forever purged from my life. Jenna and I would see to that, our righteous fury burning hotter with every treacherous detail we uncovered. As the appointed day dawned, a sense of grim determination settled over me. It was time to stop playing the victim and take control of my own destiny. Greg and Delia had made their bed, and now they would lie in it, their web of lies unraveled before the very people they'd sought to deceive. No more games, no more deception. Only the cold, hard truth and the consequences they so richly deserved. The days leading up to the family gathering were a flurry of activity as Jenna and I meticulously prepared for our grand reveal. Every detail had to be perfect, from the staging of the evidence to the timing of our dramatic entrance. "We can't leave anything to chance," Jenna muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration as she arranged the damning documents in a precise order. "One misstep, and they'll try to wriggle their way out of this mess." I nodded grimly, my jaw set with determination. "They won't get that chance. We'll have them dead to rights, with nowhere to run." As the appointed day drew nearer, a strange dichotomy took hold within me. On the surface, I maintained a facade of normalcy, going about my daily routine as if nothing were amiss. But beneath that veneer, a storm of emotions raged. Anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for justice. Greg remained oblivious to the gathering storm, his guilt and paranoia driving him deeper into a spiral of deception. I watched him with a mixture of pity and disgust, marveling at the depths to which he had sunk. "How could you do this to me, Greg?" I asked one night, my voice laced with venom. "To our family?" He froze, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. For a moment, I thought he might finally come clean, to confess his sins and beg for forgiveness. But then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out, his words dripping with vitriol. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he spat, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you're so innocent, but you're just as guilty as the rest of us." His words stung, but I refused to let him see my pain. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely resolve, my voice low and dangerous. "Keep telling yourself that, Greg. But know this, the truth always comes out in the end, no matter how hard you try to bury it." As the days ticked down, the tension in our household became palpable, a thick fog of mistrust and resentment that hung heavy in the air. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt driving a wedge between us that seemed insurmountable. But through it all, Jenna and I remained steadfast, our resolve hardening with each passing hour. We were warriors on a mission, armed with the weapons of truth and justice, and nothing would deter us from our path. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived, and we put the final touches on our plan. The stage was set, the evidence meticulously arranged, and the guest list carefully curated to ensure maximum impact. As the guests began to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of excitement mingled with trepidation. This was it, the moment we'd been building towards, the culmination of weeks of planning and preparation. Greg and Delia arrived fashionably late, as always, their smug expressions a clear indication that they had no idea what was in store for them. As they mingled with the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and basking in the illusion of normalcy, I caught Jenna's eye from across the room. She gave me a subtle nod, her expression grim and determined. It was time. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, the weight of the evidence heavy in my hands. All eyes turned towards me, a hush falling over the room as I cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady and unwavering. "But I'm afraid this isn't the celebration you were led to believe." Greg's brow furrowed in confusion, but before he could speak, I pressed on. "No, this is something far more important, a reckoning, if you will. This is a chance to shed light on the lies and deception that have been festering in our midst for far too long." Jenna stepped forward, her expression steely as she brandished the stack of documents. "Greg and Delia, you have been caught red-handed," she announced, her voice ringing out in the stunned silence. "Your betrayal, your greed, your utter disregard for the people who loved you. It all ends here today." As the truth began to unfold, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes widened in shock and disbelief. But I pressed on, unflinching, laying bare every sordid detail of their duplicity. The stolen money, the secret rendezvous, the twisted prenatal agreement. Nothing was left uncovered, no stone unturned in our pursuit of justice. With each new revelation, Greg and Delia's faces drained of color, their smug expressions replaced by ones of abject horror. And when it was over, when the last damning piece of evidence had been presented, a deafening silence hung in the air. All eyes turned towards the disgraced couple, their guilt laid bare for all to see. In that moment, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me, a righteous fury that burned brighter than any flame. They had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences, the scorn and condemnation of the very people they had sought to deceive. As Greg opened his mouth to speak, to offer some feeble excuse or desperate plea for forgiveness, I held up my hand, silencing him with a single defiant gesture. "Save your breath," I said, my voice laced with icy contempt. "The time for lies is over. You've dug your graves, and now you'll lie in them." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving them to face the music they had so richly earned. The game was over, the battle won, and justice, at long last, had been served. The moment the truth spilled forth, a hush descended over the room, the weight of Greg and Delia's betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Stunned faces turned towards the disgraced couple, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Greg was the first to break the silence, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Leila, you can't be serious. This is all just a big misunderstanding." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice dripping with contempt. "Save it, Greg. The evidence speaks for itself. Your lies, your deceit, your utter disregard for me and our family. It's all right here, laid bare for everyone to see." Delia stepped forward, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're making a huge mistake, Lila," she hissed, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Greg and I love each other. We were going to come clean, to start a new life together." A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disbelief. "Is that what you tell yourself at night, Delia? That this was all some grand love affair, some romantic notion of destiny?" I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "Let me clear the air for you. This was nothing more than a calculated scheme, a vile plot to bleed me dry and leave me with nothing. And the worst part? You used our friendship, our bond, as a weapon against me." Jenna stepped forward, her expression one of barely contained fury as she brandished a sheaf of documents. "Don't even try to deny it, you two. We have it all right here. The money trails, the secret accounts, the twisted prenatal agreement." As she began to recite the sordid details of their deception, Greg and Delia's faces paled, the realization of their exposure setting in. Murmurs of outrage rippled through the crowd, hands flying to cover gasps of shock and horror. "You see?" I said, my voice ringing out over the din. "This was never about love or destiny or any of that fairy tale garbage. It was about greed, pure and simple, a despicable act of betrayal perpetrated by two people who claimed to care about me." Greg opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Don't bother with excuses or apologies, Greg. They'll fall on deaf ears. You made your bed, and now you get to lie in it." Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep, steadying breath. I know this is a lot to take in, believe me, but the truth had to come out, no matter how ugly or painful it might be. Greg and Delia have been living a lie, spinning a web of deception that ensnared us all. "But no more," Jenna chimed in, her voice resolute. "Their games end here, their lies exposed for all to see. It's time for them to face the consequences of their actions." As the weight of our words sank in, a palpable shift occurred in the room. The initial shock and disbelief gave way to outrage, fingers pointed and voices raised in condemnation. Greg and Delia shrank back, their facade of confidence crumbling in the face of such overwhelming censure. But just when I thought their humiliation was complete, one final twist emerged, a revelation that not even I could have anticipated. "You know, Lila," Delia said, her voice laced with a newfound bravado, "you're only seeing part of the picture here." My brow furrowed as I regarded her warily. "What are you talking about?" A cruel smile twisted her lips as she beckoned Greg closer. "Go on, darling. Tell them the real reason you got involved with me in the first place." Greg hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, before finally letting out a defeated sigh. "The truth is, Delia never really loved me. This was all just a long con, a way for her to get her hands on our money." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the full weight of his words sank in. Delia, emboldened by Greg's confession, tossed her head back and laughed, a cold, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. "That's right," she crowed, her eyes glittering with malice. Greg was just a means to an end, a useful idiot to be bled dry until there was nothing left. And once I had what I wanted, I was going to leave his sorry ass in the dust. The room erupted in a cacophony of outrage, voices raised in a clamor of fury and condemnation. But through it all, Delia remained unrepentant, her expression one of smug satisfaction. As for Greg, he simply hung his head in shame, the full weight of his betrayal and stupidity crashing down upon him. In that moment, I felt a fleeting pang of pity for the man I had once loved, a weak, pathetic creature who had allowed himself to be so thoroughly manipulated and deceived. But that pity was quickly overshadowed by a sense of grim vindication. Delia's true nature had been laid bare for all to see, her veneer of charm and innocence stripped away to reveal the cold, calculating monster beneath. As the chaos swirled around us, I caught Jenna's eye, a silent understanding passing between us. Our mission had been accomplished, and then some. Not only had we exposed Greg and Delia's lies, but we had uncovered an even deeper layer of depravity. With a small nod, we turned and walked away, leaving the disgraced pair to face the music they had so richly earned. The battle was won, the truth laid bare, and in the end, justice had prevailed. In the aftermath of the explosive revelation, a deafening silence descended over the room, broken only by the occasional murmur of disbelief or outraged whisper. All eyes were fixed on Greg and Delia, the once smug couple reduced to cowering, disgraced shells of their former selves. I stepped forward, my voice ringing out loud and clear. Well, there you have it, folks, the truth in all its ugly glory. Greg and Delia, the lying, cheating, manipulative scum who thought they could play us all for fools. Delia opened her mouth, no doubt to spew forth another torrent of excuses or justifications, but I silenced her with a sharp gesture. Save your breath, Delia. Your words are as hollow and meaningless as your supposed love for Greg. You've been exposed for the vile, greedy snake that you truly are. Greg flinched as if struck, his face a mask of shame and regret. Lila, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just lost. Weak. Delia took advantage of me, preyed on my vulnerabilities. A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disgust. Don't even try to play the victim card, Greg. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what was to come. Friends, family, I know this is a lot to take in. Believe me, I understand the shock, the outrage, the sense of betrayal you're all feeling right now. But this is the reality we face. Two people we trusted, two people we loved, have revealed themselves to be nothing more than manipulative, selfish liars. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by nods and muttered curses directed at the disgraced pair. And now, it falls to us to decide what comes next. Do we forgive them, turn a blind eye to their transgressions, and allow them to slink back into our lives, our trust forever shattered? Or do we stand tall, united in our resolve to see justice done? I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in before continuing. As for me, the choice is clear. Greg, you are no longer my husband, not in any way that matters. Our marriage, our vows, our entire life together, it was all built on a foundation of lies and deception, and I will not abide by that any longer. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a withering glare. No, Greg, you don't get to speak, not anymore. Your words have lost all meaning, all power over me. From this day forward, I am severing all ties with you, legal, financial, emotional. You are dead to me, a ghost from a past I'm ready to leave behind. Turning to Delia, I felt a fresh wave of fury wash over me, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. And you vile manipulative serpent, you wormed your way into my life, exploited my trust and friendship for your own twisted gain. You are the embodiment of everything I despise, greed, selfishness, utter disregard for the harm you cause others. Delia recoiled as if struck, her eyes wide with fear and indignation, but I pressed on, undeterred. Mark my words, Delia, I will see you pay for what you've done. Every cent you've stolen, every life you've ruined in your quest for wealth and power, it will all come crashing down around you. The legal system may be blind, but I will make sure it sees the truth, the full extent of your depravity." A hush fell over the room as the gravity of my words sank in. Greg and Delia stood frozen, their faces pale and drawn, the weight of their sins finally bearing down upon them. "So you see, there is no forgiveness here, no second chances. You've made your beds, and now you get to lie in them, surrounded by the wreckage of your lies and betrayals." With a final, contemptuous glance at the disgraced pair, I turned and walked away, my head held high. The battle was over, the war won. And in the end, justice would be served, no matter the cost. The fallout from the grand revelation was swift and uncompromising. Within days, the divorce papers had been filed, my lawyers moving with ruthless efficiency to extricate me from the cesspool of lies that had been my marriage to Greg. "He won't know what hit him," my attorney assured me, a predatory glint in her eye as she outlined the legal onslaught we had planned. "We're going to bleed him dry, just like he and that snake Delia tried to do to you." I nodded, my jaw set with grim determination. Good. I want him ruined, financially, socially, in every way imaginable. He doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed. True to her word, my legal team went for the jugular, meticulously documenting every cent Greg and Delia had siphoned from our accounts, every asset they'd acquired through their web of deceit. The paper trail was damning, a laundry list of fraud and financial malfeasance that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. As the case gained momentum, more and more of Delia's past misdeeds came to light, a veritable trail of broken friendships, ruined lives, and shattered trust in her wake. It seemed she'd been running her long con for years, preying on the naive and vulnerable with a ruthless, single-minded focus. With each new revelation, my disgust for the woman I'd once called my best friend deepened. How could I have been so blind, so utterly taken in by her lies and manipulations? The signs had all been there, but I'd chosen to ignore them, blinded by my own desperate desire to believe in the sanctity of our friendship. But no more. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and I saw Delia for the vile, heartless creature she truly was. And as the lawsuits and criminal charges piled up against her, I felt a savage sense of satisfaction, knowing that her reign of terror was finally coming to an end. Greg, for his part, tried every trick in the book to wriggle out of the legal noose tightening around his neck. He begged, he pleaded, he even tried to shift the blame onto Delia, painting himself as the helpless victim of her machinations. "You have to believe me, Leela," he implored during one particularly heated courtroom confrontation. "I was just a pawn in her game, a means to an end. I never meant to hurt you like this." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice laced with icy contempt. "Save your breath, Greg. Your lies and excuses mean nothing to me now. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." As the legal battles raged on, my life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. The cloud of deception and betrayal that had hung over me for so long was finally starting to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. I threw myself into my work, pouring all my pain and anger into my writing. The words flowed like never before, each sentence a cathartic release, a purging of the toxicity that had plagued me for far too long. And as the dust settled and the legal battles reached their inevitable conclusion, I found myself standing triumphant amidst the wreckage of Greg and Delia's lies. They had been well and truly vanquished, their ill-gotten gains stripped away, their reputations in tatters. Greg was a shell of his former self, his once charming veneer stripped away to reveal the weak, cowardly man beneath. Delia, too, had been brought low, her arrogance and swagger replaced by the haunted look of a woman who had finally been made to face the consequences of her actions. As for me, I stood tall and unbroken, my resolve tempered by the fires of adversity. The pain and betrayal I had endured would forever leave their scars, but they had also made me stronger, more resilient than I ever could have imagined. With the legal battles behind me and my financial future secure, I turned my attention to the next chapter of my life. The world was my oyster, a blank canvas upon which I could paint the vibrant hues of my own destiny. I quit my job, said goodbye to the stifling confines of the office, and embarked on a new path, one of self-discovery, growth, and the pursuit of my true passions. I traveled, I explored, I immersed myself in the rich tapestry of life that had been denied to me for far too long. And through it all, I found myself surrounded by a newfound sense of freedom and joy, unburdened by the weight of lies and betrayal that had once threatened to crush me. My friends and family rallied around me, their love and support a constant reminder that true strength lies not in weathering the storm alone, but in embracing the unbreakable bonds of those who truly care. As I stood on the precipice of this new beginning, I couldn't help but reflect on the long, arduous journey that had brought me to this point. The pain, the heartbreak, the searing betrayal, it had all been a crucible, a test of my mettle and my resolve. And in the end, I had emerged victorious, tempered by the fires of adversity, but never consumed by them. Greg and Delia's lies had once threatened to break me, but instead they had forged me into something stronger, something unbreakable. With a contented smile, I turned my face towards the rising sun, basking in the warmth of a new day, a new life. The shadows of the past had been banished, and the future stretched out before me, ripe with boundless possibility. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly free. Free to chase my dreams, to embrace my passions, and to forge my own destiny on my own terms. The game was over, the battle won, and the spoils belonged to me alone.